Welcome to Let's Talk Antigonish, the podcast where we sit down with neighbors, experts, and friends to explore the stories, the questions, and the big little issues that shape life in our town, one conversation at a time. Today we're talking all about immigration in Antigonish. Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Talk Antigonish. Anuj, you're back.
I am back.
So co-host Anuj.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why I'm back from Kenya and India, but I'm back.
Because it was warm and there wasn't 18 feet of snow. I don't know what you're doing here, sir.
Well.
Well, welcome back, Anuj, and I'm other co-host, Justin. And today we are here, well, strangely enough, to talk about moving between countries. We're here to talk about immigration.
Yeah.
So it's a subject that everyone in this town has bumped into because this town has a large number of immigrants, I would say.
Yes.
And we have an actual legit expert. That makes it sound like
that
we rarely have experts. We always have experts, and today we're lucky enough to have another expert.
A neighbor as well.
And neighbor and friend. And that is Peter Goldie, this is going to get this title correctly, Regulated Canadian Immigration Consultant, RCIC.
That's correct.
Okay, so what does that mean? Did you have to take a test and get a certificate? Or?
Yeah, so in Canada, there is certain requirements that if a person is going to offer immigration advice to someone and they're going to collect a fee for it, then they either have to be a lawyer or they have to be a regulated Canadian immigration consultant.
Okay, so you had to take a test on these are all the rules and the laws you have to know to be.
That's right. Okay. So I took a program through UBC on immigration law. I wrote my qualifying exam, and I have to do yearly education components to renew my license each year. So it's highly regulated, and it's very important to make sure that if people are going to be offering this advice, that they actually know what they're talking about.
Okay, so you are an expert, you own your own consultancy, and you work with another bigger consultancy. Is that right?
That's right. So I have my own personal practice, I guess, here in Antigonish, but I'm also the senior RCIC for a larger company based in Newfoundland called Work Global Canada.
So let's kick this off.
Yeah.
What do you think is the number one question people want to know about immigration, Anuj? What's at the top of the list?
Yeah, we have been hearing there's a lot of changes happening in immigration, and Canada has changed its policy or its outlook towards immigration. Break that down for us. What does it mean? Has Canada stopped doing immigration or what?
Sure. So there has actually been quite a few changes in the last couple of years. A lot of it has to do with sort of the after effects of COVID. So when COVID happened, there was a shortage of qualified workers to fill a lot of positions. And the government sort of relaxed a lot of their policies around immigration in order to encourage more workers essentially to come in to Canada to fill these vacancies. The government sort of increased options that would allow temporary workers to become permanent residents inside Canada. And so this sort of created an influx of a lot of temporary residents into the country. And in the last 2 years, there was sort of a blowback towards these policies.
Why the blowback?
Well, there's a lot of sort of speculation about what sort of happened, but one of the ones that the government is really focusing on is the idea of right now, right across Canada, there's issues that are involved with housing. There's not enough housing in the country. Housing stocks have been sort of an issue for a long period of time. Same with healthcare, long wait times for people to get access to healthcare. And the government has sort of focused on temporary residents as the explanation that they're giving for these shortages.
So what changed after the blowback then?
So what has really happened is one of the biggest pieces is that the government has sort of identified that the total population in Canada, they want to see the number of temporary residents in the country to be at about 5% of the population. But right now, it's closer to 6.5%. So what we're seeing sort of a restriction on immigration programs. They're reducing the number of foreign nationals that can access these programs or the number of current residents inside Canada. They're restricting the options for them to renew their immigration status. And essentially the idea is that over this period of time, the government feels that a restriction on these programs will reduce the number of residents, temporary residents in the country as people sort of their status in Canada expires and they return to their home country.
So does that mean, because you can be a temporary resident applying for permanent residency, that's a big thing. That's the path that I took. So in that policy, does that mean they want to convert more people to be permanent residents or take the people who are temporary and make them go away?
So unfortunately, it's the latter,
Okay.
which is not something that, people in my profession think is a good idea. And a lot of industry experts are sort of the same idea, which is that there is still a genuine labor shortage in this country, especially in smaller, more rural communities like Antigonish. And by restricting access to these permanent residency programs, it doesn't address the labor shortages that we're sort of experiencing.
Okay.
But it ultimately, that would be one of the biggest concerns.
Yeah. So I think why should we as Antigonishers be talking about this issue? How does this play out in a small town or county like Antigonish?
So, I mean, one of the biggest factors that, certain portions of the government have sort of recognized as an issue is an aging population. So communities like Antigonish have an aging population. This means, a lower tax base as more and more people retire. And at the same time, as people age, there's a lot more need for services from an aging population. So this means that, a need for elder care in retirement facilities, a need for healthcare professionals in order to provide more services that an aging population requires. And that
Right.
workforce needs to come from somewhere.
So that will be people working at Maples or Parkland.
Or the arcade, yeah.
Or arcades, or
Yeah.
even at the hospital as nurses and CCAs, all that, right?
That's right. Even with, younger Canadians stepping up to fill these roles, there still is a genuine shortage.
What about, I've heard this argument, I don't know how true that is that, with the aging population, also your tax base is going lower. So you need younger population to continue to contribute to your tax base and keep your CPP, kitty intact. Is there a water in that argument at all?
Well, it's certainly, at least from an immigration perspective, each province does have its own, essentially, they can administer their own permanent residency pathways.
Right.
And when you look at a province like Nova Scotia, which had a declining population for such a long time, comparing to Ontario or British Columbia, the thresholds for a foreign national to access one of these permanent residency programs was much lower in Nova Scotia than it was in other provinces.
Oh, right.
And like Ontario. And that was because the province needed to encourage young people to come here to work and to pay taxes. And
Yeah. So then let's talk then about that tension, right? Because we do need more people at the nursing homes and at the hospital and things like that. So we need more people in this town. You're saying that seems to be true. But at the same time, we have this problem of housing in this town, that's the main argument that caused that rift a few years ago. So how are you seeing that tension play out? Which is, I imagine, would like more immigrants here, but then a lot of people locally are complaining about I have long wait times at the hospital. There's too many people. There's a housing shortage. So what is happening there in your expert opinion? So
I think ultimately some of these issues that are in place that we have here, in a lot of ways, I think that the solution that is needed is something that actually needs to be done at a government level. So, a big problem is a shortage of affordable housing. So that's not something that can be addressed through immigration or having foreign nationals leave. There is still going to be a shortage of housing stock in this community for the foreseeable future. And a lot of it also has to do with about how available resources are directed. And, that's something that goes beyond immigration.
Yeah. So, these newcomers and immigrants are in our town, and they are, they have come here for different reasons, different streams. We have health workers who have been invited. We have international students who have were given 3-year work visa after they graduated, but may not be renewed their work permit or have a pathway to permanent residency. We have people from Ukrainian friends who came here out of desperation and may not have, or seems to be not have, very clear path as other people who have come here to permanent residency. How does this play out in our community? We have people working in Tim Hortons and Walmarts who are doing minimum wage job. How does that play out in our community?
So I guess what we're seeing now with these changes that have occurred in the last 2 years, where there is a reduction in the number of potential candidates that can receive permanent residency.
Right.
It has created sort of an uncertainty for foreign nationals, especially for international graduates from universities and colleges, which was that when there was still, when the numbers of permanent residents that were still accessing these programs were much higher, then it was kind of clearer that a person may, for example, attend university. Once they graduate, they get a 3-year postgraduate work permit. They could then work for an employer who would then nominate them for permanent residency. So the issue that I think that we're running into right now is that the most common vacancy in a community like Antigonish, because we don't have a lot of heavy industry, we don't have a lot of industrial base, the most common vacancy that we're looking at is service sector jobs. Like you said, these are jobs that are minimum wage. They are something that maybe, a young person in their early 20s might be able to survive on, but certainly not somebody with a family. But with the reduction in permanent residency nominations that can be selected throughout the year, the government has made this decision that service sector jobs are not what they see as suitable
or critical gap.
For this critical gap. So it creates sort of this situation where the jobs that need to be filled are service sector jobs, but these jobs are no longer, there's less likelihood of being selected for permanent residency by filling these jobs. But the jobs that our government has perceived as being critical, they don't quite exist yet. That if we're right now, the Nova Scotia government is really focused on primary resource extraction as a way of increasing revenues. But
that's a whole different subject.
That's a whole different subject.
And those jobs aren't yet here.
They're not here. They're not going to be here for the next few years. So right now, the people that are currently here and are currently working are filling labor needs, but they're not given access to permanent residency.
So
I think bottom line question that coming to me is, are we likely to see some of the people who are here in our town and county, are they likely to not be here and be pushed out and gone back? International students, Ukrainian friends, temporary workers. How uncertain is the situation right now?
Unfortunately, it is a very uncertain situation. It is something that one of the things is that if a person is pursuing permanent residency as part of their long-term goal, it's important to be as informed as possible. And it's one of the biggest difficulties about this industry, my profession and immigration in general, is that the governments do have, they can unilaterally change prerequisites for programs at little or no notice. And it creates a major problem for a lot of people where up until last week, the Nova Scotia government had 10 different potential PNP, like provincial nomination programs that a person could access, and they've condensed them to 4. But they didn't inform anybody about this change. So now there's slight changes and variations to programs, and it can happen at any time, and it can create a real problem for a lot of people. We can see that in something like it's been almost 2 years now since anybody who works in hospitality or accommodation industries could apply for permanent residency through the PNP programs in Nova Scotia.
So if you work like if you work at Tim Hortons or something, you can no longer use that job as a path toward permanent residency. Is that what you're saying?
That's right, at least for now, and there might be a change at any time. One of the biggest concerns is that, the government is not really listening to industry advocates. Mm-hmm. So I think anybody who works in tourism in Nova Scotia or in the hospitality industry would say that they need access to these immigration programs, because part of their one of the ways that you can retain good workers is by offering them support for their long-term plans of obtaining permanent residency. Yeah. And by closing those avenues, it creates a situation where people can no longer retain workers.
We see actually the federal government for immigration happens to be from Nova Scotia.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. But that aside, I think, we probably, in this podcast will never be able to influence enough the federal, policy or even provincial policy. But as friends, as neighbors, as Antigonishers, what are some of the myths and what are some of the things that, we can break for them? Or how should we respond to this uncertainty in our community?
Well, I think that one of the things that might be there is that, at least from an immigration perspective, the large majority of how immigration works in Canada is through economic immigration. It's through the support and a job offer from a Canadian-based employer that wants to support foreign workers in obtaining permanent residency. And I think one of the biggest things is that there is labor shortages in this community, and there's labor shortages in types of industries that have been identified as critical from an immigration perspective, like healthcare, like social services, like construction. And a lot of these employers, they may not have any experience with immigration, and that they may not be aware that there's these hardworking, incredibly positive foreign nationals that are already in the community, that want to stay in the community, that could fill these labor shortages. If the employer is just made a bit more aware of how they can access these immigration programs. Certainly, there's been a lot of success with retirement communities where they have international graduates that come and work for them. They may not have worked in healthcare in the past, but they're hardworking, they're really positive individuals, and they're willing to work as continuing care attendants.
Yeah, I was there at Parkland the other day, and most of the people who are working there, taking care, are come from many different places in the world.
Yeah, visible immigrants.
Visible immigrants.
Yeah, and usually the primary reason for that is that if any Canadian is interested in healthcare, they're usually going into medicine or nursing. So if a Canadian is a registered nurse, they're going to go work at the hospital. They're not going to be working as a continuing care attendant. Whereas if you're a foreign national, it's much easier to become qualified to work as a CCA, and that's designated as a priority industry position.
I have a question about, like, if you're just the average person here in town, like, where are you going to bump into someone you've noticed is an immigrant, and how do you feel about it? And I think that the place you see the most visible people who are, brown people with an accent, right, is going to be
black people with
black people with anyone with an accent,
any
color with an accent, or someone who's brown or black, is going to be in the retail or service industry, and that's where your average person from Antigonish, I think, is going to bump into someone who seems like an immigrant to them. And then you hear this complaint, which I get a lot of, like, why is someone like Tim Hortons hiring all these foreign people when there are local people who could do the job? And there's a lot of tension around that. And
is it?
I hear this all the time, and you probably bump into this all the time. And then I always have my arguments as to why this is wrong. But I would like to hear what you have to say, because you must bump into this tension.
One of the main things is that, I think the feedback that I would get from a lot of employers is that it's, kind of a boomer mentality, which is young people don't want to work anymore. And so they feel, that they're not getting great performance out of teenagers to fill these entry-level positions. But international graduates, students, they're willing to put in the time and the hours and the efforts to do a good job in these positions. So from an employer's perspective, they see it as it's much better from an operating perspective to have a mature foreign national fill this position than have a teenager that's calling in sick all the time. That's the feedback that I get from employers. And that's why employers see immigration as a really great system. Now, that's the idea of work ethic with young people is really an entirely different topic. And,
right.
And how much I actually...
Whether or not that's true. Yeah, it's
true
a hot button
is a different topic altogether.
Yeah. As an immigrant support person, you probably may or may not be aware of the social dynamic, but how does it show up when these people show up in your room, in your office? What kind of stress you see in
I see a lot of stress, and I see a lot of, there was a lot of young people that have come to Canada from other countries. It's been a long-term family decision oftentimes to come here, to expend a lot of resources in order to come here, as ultimately the idea of if you can come here and you can put down roots in Canada, then it's going to be overall a better experience for a young person in the long term. But that also comes back to the idea of a major problem that Canada has from an employer's perspective is not recognizing foreign work experience and foreign credentials.
Yes.
And that is something that a lot of feedback is that our international graduates are very underemployed based on their experience and their credentials.
I was at the RK doing some volunteer work, and there was a guy who was from India, and he was just I don't know what his position was, a carer, sort of a lower on the ladder carer, and I went up to him, I'm like, tell me, what is your advanced graduate degree? He's like, oh, I have a master's in journalism. Like I knew he was going to be like highly educated, because that's the way. But those sorts of degrees, we talked about this last week with the pharmacists. That's changed recently, but like pharmacy people from abroad, they had to retrain and all that, even though their degree from back home was higher than you would get in Nova Scotia. And that seems to have been a battle that's been ongoing. And you're saying you see this all the time?
Yeah, I mean, most people that I've interacted with from an immigration perspective usually have higher level of education than the younger Canadians that are in the same role as them. But again, a big process where the government doesn't seem to be fully processing is licensing issues, because it's not just pharmacists, but there's a huge shortage of dental professionals. Mm-hmm. Very hard if you're a foreign trained dentist to become licensed in Canada.
We have somebody who just arrived.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Someone I know?
Yes.
You're looking right at me.
Yeah, one of your disciples in improv, her brother.
Oh, of course, yes, that's right.
Yeah, and my fiance is a foreign trained dentist, and she can't practice here.
Oh, really?
But yeah,
so it's hits home for you.
Yeah,
yeah. Wow.
And but this is the thing, is that even with and because it's personal, dentist is the one that comes to mind the most. Mm. But even if a person is a foreign trained dentist, there is roadblocks in place so that they can't quickly work as a dental assistant or as a dental hygienist, and that even if a government is going to say, well, no, we're not going to, you're going to have to do a certain amount of retraining to be a full dentist, a foreign trained dentist could work as a dental hygienist and could be able to work under a licensed dentist.
Yeah, which is annoying and insulting if you're a dentist, I imagine.
This is a very complex subject, right? And I just wonder, as we come to the close of this particular episode, as Antigonish, as a community, how do we kind of begin to respond to this in a very human way? How do we? Yes, there are technical issues. There are legal issues. But as Antigonish, how should we respond to this uncertainty, where we see fairly largish number of new people in our community?
Yeah, should we be doing some sort of advocacy or change hiring practices?
Or have conversations around that, how the stress they are feeling,
Well, I mean, you're right. I think that the population of Antigonish has become much more diverse than when I was a child here, growing up in the 90s. But, Canada, or Antigonish, has had a long tradition of being very open to newcomers. Beyond, the fact that almost everybody here is descendants of immigrants, but the Coady International Institute has been, a great example of how Antigonish as a community has seen the global community as a very important thing. And I think that, at least when it comes to the idea of like our current situation and the way our community operates, certainly I think a greater level of communication between groups can certainly help. I mean, certainly the idea that, if employers are facing labor shortages, I don't think we're seeing enough awareness about how can we support businesses to fill these labor shortages with willing and ready workers. How can employers that currently hire foreign nationals, they may not have a lot of understanding about how they can support the long-term immigration goals of their employees. And I guess information is important.
One number that I heard the other day at CBC interview was that by June of this year, there are likely to be 1.5 million temporary residents in Canada who may or may not be able to obtain papers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very we have never faced that situation before in this country, and it's very not possible to really understand how this will get resolved. And this is showing up in our town and county like real time. And so this is something to be aware of. I think. Thank you for sharing that.
Peter, I'll give you the last word then. Like, what would you see as the best way forward for the government in terms of how they should legislate things to both make it fairer for people who are here or coming here and also better for our economy? Because we still have the problem of a labor shortage, and these laws seem to be making it harder. So if you could wave a magic wand and change legislation, what would you like to see done?
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is that there is from my personal perspective, I would say that what we should be looking at is there should be an increase in the number of ways that a person who has been in Canada for an extended period of time as a temporary resident can access permanent residency. One of the big things is I read an article recently, I think in the National Post or the Globe and Mail, where it was the president of the Ukrainian Federation of Canada who said, we need a special program for all the Ukrainians that came here because of the conflict in Ukraine. They've been living here. They're establishing themselves. They should have access to PR. And I think that's true. But so has hundreds of thousands of Indian students that have come here to attend universities. They've also established themselves in the province, so in the country. So I think all of people that have come here over the last few years and have been here for an extended period of time, I think the government really should be focusing on, if you're already here, how can we get you to stay permanently?
And is there an argument to be made that, if Canada government in theory had to make a choice to bring that 6.5% to 5%, they probably are better off working with people who are already here rather than bring new people in to.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately that would be a better way of doing it.
Right.
And that's the way I see it as ultimately a goal that, that we should be aspiring to is that, if people are here and they're paying taxes, they should have a better chance at.
I hope the powers that be are listening.
I suspect not, but possibly, Anuj. You don't know how powerful we are.
No, but we talked to Michelle.
That's true.
And she was so positive about all the immigration support that she's getting in the health sector, and she was very positive about it. So
Yeah. Well, this is great, Peter. If someone has an immigration question, but they don't have, they don't want to be a client because they can't afford. Where can you go with immigration questions if you're a person,
Sure.
You're just curious or you're stuck in a situation?
So yeah, if depending on my availability through my website, people can book a consultation with me, and I do have availability. I try to arrange a time to do a consultation with them, and then if there is something looks like something that's good for them, and that, they want to retain me as a representative, then that's something I can work with them. I think what I would like to do, at least in the near term, is maybe collaborate with the library and maybe do a free information seminar at some point.
We were talking to Akala actually about this, and I think they would be very keen, library and Akala.
Yeah, I think something like that, it would be, general information. I wouldn't focus on people's personal immigration stuff. Yeah. But I think a day where I could offer some free information for people so they can have a better understanding might be good. And the other thing too is that I would also tell people to be very careful about where they're getting their information.
Yeah.
I think one of the best ways to really know if something is real or not is looking on the IRCC website.
Sure.
Right.
So that makes sense. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for coming in.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for having me. It's most appreciated.
All right. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Antigonish. If you like the podcast, don't hesitate to subscribe. Just go to letstalkantigonish.ca and click. Voila! You'll receive new episodes right in your email inbox.
This podcast is a labor of love. Please consider making a contribution, small or large. Maybe a monthly subscription. Depending on the level of public support, we would like to engage local producers and journalists to create more regular deep dive news stories about life here in Antigonish.
Right now, it's just Anuj and I doing this in our free time. You can read all about the podcast and ways to support us at letstalkantigonish.ca. And if you're a local business that wants to sponsor the podcast or even place an audio ad, we are certainly not opposed. A huge thank you to all of our subscribers and especially our paid subscribers, which have helped us to buy the audio equipment that we needed to get this thing off the ground. And remember to get in touch with us if you have an idea for a future episode or a burning question about life in Antigonish that you want us to explore and get answers to. We welcome all feedback. Just email us at letstalkantigonish@gmail.com. Let's talk, Antigonish.